disappointed with my LSAT score because I know I was not scoring that low on all the practice tests, but I freak out really easily on exams. And I really think that is what screwed me over in the end. How are you?
Sure. No, I'm good. Thanks. I'm good. I always love talking LSAT. I always love helping folks out. So I'd love to talk through with you what happened on the previous LSAT, what you think might have happened, and of course, what we can do going forward for you.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So
So,
you
oh,
said that you said that your practice test score, what that your practice test scores were higher than what ultimately happened on test day itself, right?
yes. So I was scoring in the high 160s. I even scored a 172 three times, and that's what I was aiming for because my top school is Yale or Georgetown. And so, keeping that in mind, that's how I've been studying the past 6 months. And when the day came to take the LSAT, I thought I was, good to go, really prepared. And then just the whole proctoring system kind of really threw me off. This person was kind of like going through like my laptop in the middle of the sections. She just kind of stopped me and was like, oh, I need to check something really quickly and I'll let you resume. And then that just kind of threw me off my game because I just don't think that they were professional or really knew what to do ahead of time. And so that just kind of added to the anxiety that I already had. I was even stopped within 5 minutes of my last section, and I had to argue with the proctor to let me do that section again because she had wasted like 5 minutes of my time just to check my computer or something. And I wrote that down in the survey and everything that I sent back to the LSAC. And then another problem that I found that I was having is when I started the exam for about like 5 minutes, I was just kind of stuck reading the logical reasoning section, like question number one, and it just wouldn't go through my head. And I was having a lot of like built up anxiety and really straining my eyes since, you have glasses. I can assume like, you know what I mean, when things strain your eyes for a long time. So I think timing was something that really screwed me up, test day jitters, and just the unprofessional actions of the proctor really threw me off that day.
Oh, this sounds like a terrible test day experience. So I'm sorry that you
Yeah.
had to go through that. I know how frustrating it can be. I hear stories from students a lot about proctoring issues. Then you also have the issue of that first question kind of getting stuck there. So those are two things I'd love to dive a bit deeper with you on. The proctoring thing, yes, these proctor issues happen. In some cases, they're unavoidable and they're just bad luck. However, there's one thing that you could potentially do going forward. It's not a guarantee, of course, proctors are human, but it's worth a shot, which is before you start the exam, next time around, you ask them, hey, if you have to pause, if you have to do anything during the timed portion of the exam for any reason, can you please pause the clock? Just please
Yeah.
pause the timer before doing anything because this exam is strictly timed. Every second counts. Of course, they may or may not honor that, but at least you'll know that you tried. So that's one thing that comes to mind. Regarding the first question kind of getting stuck there, I do get what you mean. Sometimes I'm looking at something and kind of just my eyes glaze over and all kind of runs together.
Hmm.
So I hear you if that's what you were experiencing. And that relates in part to doing a warm up beforehand, maybe. So maybe before you start the exam, if you do a warm up either on paper or an LSAC site, so at least it's not the first question you're seeing when the exam begins. That's one thing I recommend. Another thing would be to cultivate mindfulness to be able to just let yourself move on and not get stuck. Typically, I would recommend that sort of thing for tougher problems. Presumably, question number one, it wasn't the difficulty of the problem, it was something else going on, maybe around stress or anxiety. And then, of course, if the proctor stuff happened before that, I could, of course, see that impacting. So let me know how that sits with you.
Yeah, definitely. I will try that out next time. I think everything is going back to in person now, but I do.
No, it's not. It's
Oh,
not. No, where'd you hear
it's.
that?
I was looking on the LSAC page today about the August LSAT and everything else moving forward, and that it was just going to be um, proctored, obviously. But I thought it said like it was going to be like in an area, but it's all online.
Oh, no, not at all. It's still online.
Oh, okay. So we're not going to a place and doing all of this.
Nope. It was online for the Flex. That's when they made the switch, but it is continuing online for the foreseeable future. LSAC has hinted at maybe offering in person in the future to specific people, are providing the option to be in person in certain locations, but that's nothing more than a hope, wish, and dream right now on their part, or maybe
Oh,
for some
okay.
people as well. It's the default is going to be online for the foreseeable future.
Okay. Okay. I guess that makes it a little bit easier on test morning to not have to rush to the place.
Exactly. You don't have to go anywhere. You can do it from the comfort of your own home. If you have a good internet connection, you can take it at the exact same desk, exact same device. You've been doing all your practice tests. So I think that's a win for a lot of folks.
Yeah, I actually think that's a pretty good idea. Just hopefully I will try out the tips you just said about the proctor next time, and hopefully the LSAT kind of takes what, everything I said into consideration just when, training the proctors, is letting them know like, hey, maybe don't exit out of the student sections, or kind of like do everything beforehand, or maybe in the middle when they're like taking their break, since now it's back to the fourth section, one unscored.
Yeah, make sure that before you start that they ask them like, hey, before we start, have you done everything that you'll need to do, presumably regarding checking the security settings? It sounds to me honestly like this person probably just forgot to do everything they were supposed to do at the start.
Yeah.
They remembered midway through, and then they ended up inadvertently penalizing you for time, which is of course a terrible practice. They should, before starting, they should check your settings in some way. They should make sure there's nothing around you, nothing like no banned or prohibited items like test prep books or anything, or extra scratch paper or a dual monitor. Like they should be looking at all of that and asking about all of that before you start. If they don't do any of those things beforehand, there's definitely a problem.
Yeah, exactly. They also didn't tell me everything they were doing to my computer, so I kind of don't know what they did. So I'm just kind of I went through my settings for like a week trying to find out everything they did, because they did not tell me what they were doing to my computer, and I couldn't, keep track of all the different tabs they were opening.
Of course not. No, that sounds like a terrible experience. And
Yeah.
yeah, I
But,
would do what you can. At least now you've at least you've experienced it, so you can know what to do differently going forward in terms of just checking with them before they actually start everything.
yeah. So, it wasn't the score I wanted. I did get a 152. So I am, it could have been worse, just with the test experience I had. That's what I'm thinking, is that it could have been worse, the score that I would have gotten. Obviously, I wanted it higher, but I know that I have another shot here. But I guess another question is, because this was my first time that I took the LSAT, they are offering me the option of canceling that score until July 6th. So I have until then. So I'm not really sure. In your advice, should I cancel this score? Should I keep it? Why do people usually cancel scores?
Yeah, sure. I mean, people usually cancel scores because they have a score. Well, typically, people don't know their score before deciding whether to cancel it, with the exception of the new LSAT score preview option, which came out about a year ago now. And the truth is that people want to cancel because they feel like it didn't go well, or because they, in this case, like yours, they have a score they're not happy with. The truth is that it doesn't really matter. Law schools don't average multiple LSAT scores, despite any outdated advice you might see online or might hear. They only take the highest. So there's not really a downside to keeping it on record. And you can, of course, if you would like, you can write an addendum explaining what happened, what you just shared with me here, and you can a summarized version of that, and then law schools will understand the context there. If they see a cancellation, they don't really know what happened. You can also say, hey, I canceled this because proctor issues. So I canceled this because of proctor issues versus I got a 152 because of proctor issues. There's not really a difference. The cancellation just becomes a big black box. It becomes a big question mark. They can guess at what it might have been, but the truth is that they're not really going to care that much. Mm-hmm. If you have a higher score on record, they'll say to themselves, well, that one reflects her true potential. The cancellation or the 152 was just an accident due to the circumstances. It did not reflect what she's capable of. So I don't think it really matters what you do, to be honest. A pattern of low scores or a pattern of cancellations, neither one looks great. So of course we want to get you a top score going forward, and we'll do everything we can to get you there. But that's what's going to make the difference for you.
Okay. So, even if I did cancel it, or even if I kept it, it's not really like a big difference in their eyes when they're reviewing my application if I do get in my dream score range with the next exam.
Yeah, not really. Let's say that next time you get a 170 plus.
Mm-hmm.
It would be hard to get a 170 plus by blind guessing, right? That's incredibly unlikely to do. So they'll say to themselves, well, she clearly knows what she's doing. She got a top score. The 152, obviously, something happened. Even if you didn't write an addendum, they're going to think it was a proctor issue. She got really stressed out, or maybe it was that let's see, that she didn't study beforehand. Like it was like some pre-law advisors will tell folks, take the LSAT just to see how you'll do, or take the exam just to see what it's like. And I think that's awful advice, because then you're using up a take, you're getting a score record that doesn't reflect your true potential it could have avoided. So they might guess at any one of those things, and you could write an addendum to the effect of any one of those things. People often do, but what matters is the high score you get in the end.
Okay. That's the advice I kind of wanted to hear. I was asking a lot of people who had taken it, but they are not exactly the most informed about that. They're also students. They're like, well, I wouldn't want anyone, seeing that score compared to what I got the second time around. So it's good to have a opinion from someone like you who has been in the business for a while and kind of understands that. And one thing that really led me to kind of get a class with you is I used a lot of your tips on when I was studying for the logic games. I went from getting 5 wrong or 4 wrong for each game compared to now where I'm getting none of those wrong. So, and that was because of all the videos you used to post. And I was like, oh, well, now I finally understand contrapositives and, the flip and switch and everything like that. So I was like, I definitely want to see what a class with you can get me. So I'm really excited for that. And I do have high hopes just from reading all your reviews and everything.
Fantastic. I'm glad that the logic games material helped you so much. And I'm excited to have you in the course and help you get that 170 plus.
Yeah, I'm really excited too. I hope so. So I guess what I have to say is my main things that I've been noticing is timing. So on the logic game section on the LSAT, I finished all the games except the last one where I had a minute left on the clock and I had to kind of, guess. I had to use the strategic guessing and just figure it out. But I feel like I definitely could have had more time. But I think a little bit of the problem is that, I'm diagramming every single thing, every answer choice, everything. And that's wasting a lot of time for me because I'm always doubting myself when I make my inferences oh, well, maybe this isn't right. I should just diagram everything and make sure. And that's wasting 4 minutes for me on each of the games. So timing is a really big issue. On logical reasoning,
let's stick with games for a minute, if you don't mind. I want to make sure we don't lose any of what you said about games, and we go deep there.
Yes.
So that you're diagramming everything.
Yeah.
On games. Does that mean you're diagramming all 5 answer choices?
Yes. Which is probably not the best thing to do.
It just takes too much time. That's the problem with it. So we want to help you speed up on games by helping you get more efficient. Mm-hmm. And more efficiency can come from maximizing your reuse of previous scenarios you've drawn. It can also come from strategically prioritizing some answer choices over others. So if a particular answer choice contains a particular variable that seems relatively more likely to be impactful in some way based on the question that they're asking, you may want to start there. So you can look at which variables appear in the greatest number of rules, which variables have the greatest number of inferences associated, which variables seem most powerful or most limited, and begin with those rather than just going A to E.
Right.
And the other thing about going through all 5 choices is that sometimes it becomes double checking or double confirming, where you already have a choice that works. You've already seen this could be true. So it's your answer. Now, it may only take a second to check the others, in which case I recommend checking the others just to confirm. But if checking the others is going to require drawing out a lot, that becomes a problem where double checking or triple checking and getting more confidence in that answer, if that's preventing you from getting to a game altogether, there's obviously a massive downside there.
Mm-hmm.
So I would look at seeing where you can shave off some time by maybe not confirming everything so much or drawing out everything if there are some cases where you don't need to, and seeing what that change in approach might get you.
I definitely think it will get me a little less time taking on each of the games, because I try to limit myself to at least 8 or 10 minutes per game if I can, and see if I can get all of them right within that time frame. So usually when there's a question what must be false, what must be true, I find myself taking each of the answer choices, and writing them out like an ordering game, just like writing them all out and like the different possibilities, and then just going through the list and being like, well, this can't be true, or that has to be true. And then that takes me like an additional like a minute or two. And I just don't understand how people can just look at it and then just look at the diagram and be like, well, this one's right. I don't have to go further into it.
Well, it sounds like you're listing everything out all the time. Like you're drawing every scenario all the time. I get that. So the thing is that on the one hand, it gives you a lot of certainty. It gives you a bird's eye view. You can see everything. The problem is that it's far too time consuming. I mean, if we imagine you have 7 variables, let's just say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and they can appear in various combinations. A computer program could run through all of that in 2 seconds and spit out potentially dozens or hundreds of combinations. Mm-hmm. And then it could disqualify the ones that were not permitted based upon the rules or the constraints of the game. But human beings can't really do that typically. So that's why we have like calculators and apps and such, right? To get us through that so we can focus on the more creative things. Part of creativity comes from finding ways to be more efficient so that you don't have to do all that work. Like think about how multiplication is more powerful than addition. Mm-hmm. Multiplication is like super addition. You're getting to the result much faster. Mm-hmm. And so I want to help you get to the result much faster by being strategic in terms of what you choose to focus on, what you choose to prioritize, and see if that gets you there. So you have this particular variable or this particular answer choice is the most likely. I'll start there. And if that's choice C, you start with choice C. Maybe you never even get to choice E because that was so low priority. So you can save the time by not even touching that one. But you can't draw out every single possibility for every single game up front. You also can't do it for all 5 choices. We call that brute forcing. And it can be accurate. The problem is that it doesn't work with the time constraints of the LSAT. So you can't get there within 35 minutes in a section or 8 to 10 minutes per game. By the way, the 8 minutes and 45 seconds per game is only an average amount of time you have per game. I wouldn't want you to feel like you have to limit yourself to 8 to 10 for each of the 4 games. Some games can and should ideally be done in less than 8:45, and other games might take 11, 12 minutes, and that's okay. So, for example, some of the grouping in-out conditional chain games, like the classic Birds in the Forest game, Test 33 Game 2, that can be a 6-minute game. It might not seem that way at first. You get there with time. But if you're used to doing games like that, you can do that one super fast, then save up the time for the tougher games that really need it, like the CD's game featured in Legally Blonde, Test 31 Game 2. That's got to be an 11, 12-minute game at least for the majority of people.
Oh, yeah. And, I remember when I came across that on my test prep books, and I was like, oh, my gosh, I know this from Legally Blonde. Like neither type of opera, neither type of jazz is on sale. And that took me like 15 minutes. It was one of the most difficult games that I'd ever come across.
Yeah, it is. Definitely for me as well. I think it's one of the toughest games of all time. And if that takes you, like you can't do that 8 to 10 minutes probably. Yeah. And that's fine though. The idea is that there's some other game in that section that you blast through. So you build up the time back you can apply to the tougher one. And so if you try to limit yourself to 8 to 10 minutes on that game, you're going to be banging your head against the wall and feeling frustrated. And you don't need to. But that also means that for the easier games, like maybe a simple relative ordering game or a game that fits a mold in certain ways, if you've seen enough other games like that already, you have the pattern recognition that automatically leads you down a well-worn path. So you're not reinventing the wheel on test day.
Yeah, definitely. I think it'll be really helpful to understand that timing, but then also look at ways that I can reduce how much time I'm spending on each, especially if it's not, necessary to spend that time doing that. And I definitely want to have like a little bit of time left over so I can double check on the ones that I felt a little bit skeptical about and make sure that it is the right answer.
That's what we want for you. We want for you to have a time bank on each section so you can go back to any that you might have flagged. This becomes especially useful in logical reasoning, and we can go there next. I know you had something to say about that. Logical reasoning, you might flag at least 3 to 4 questions, and that's fine. I'll flag 3 to 4 questions in one section because I just don't want to deal with them in the moment. But I'm working at a fast enough pace that I can then circle back to those later and feel like I'll have the time to deal with them. But anyway, I know you had a question on logical reasoning. Let's get into it.
Yeah. So what I found on test day was I was spending way too much time on some of the questions. Like I know, if it's a little bit difficult, or if you're not, getting onto the concept, just flag it and move on so you can get as many questions as you can without like, spending so much time on one. But I don't know why that didn't work for me during on testing. I was like, oh, I can figure it out real quick. But I think my number one thing was that I can't think, or I wasn't thinking like the test makers. I know that's like one thing that you did say was changing your mindset about how you approach questions on logical reasoning, is that it's not like the way that we think about questions, but it's like, what do they want us to like think? How do they want us to approach these questions? And so it's a matter of like, what's like the best strategy for solving logical reasoning questions? Like, how can you tell like, which one, like which answer choices are too broad or which ones are like completely irrelevant? Because on some questions, a question that I thought was very like an answer choice that I thought was really irrelevant turned out to be the right one because I'm not understanding what they want me to do here. And so I don't even know. I'm getting like 5 or 6 wrong each. And then when I think about it after, I was like, oh, well, I could have gotten that, but I wasn't thinking like that in the moment.
I hear you. So in the case, there's many answers to your question, right? There's not just one. But what you brought up about irrelevant, answer choice seeming irrelevant, to me, that comes down to certain question types like even, strengthen, or weaken, or necessary assumption, where there is some alternative possibility or explanation or factor that wasn't directly stated in the argument, in the stimulus. And so being open to those outside the box factors can be a game changer for you there. We also have the question of what exactly are they asking you for in the question stem. So that's where we get into moderate versus extreme language. So I look at things like that. Part of it is based on the question stem type. Then another factor is the stimulus. So you can think about what do they want you to do. That's where I think question stems come into play. What perspective do you need to use to view the answer choices with? But then for a stimulus, I think about what tricks and traps are they laying. And there's also tricks and traps in the answer choices too that relate to perspective. But in the stimulus, I'm thinking about how do they level up the difficulty of a stimulus. Part of it's failing to use indicator words. I think a lot of students become too reliant on indicator words for evidence and conclusion or for necessary, sufficient. You also have things like unless, except, until, without. You have them burying the conclusion in the middle. And so if you can untangle all of that and understand the logic despite what they're doing to hide it, you can then better navigate it.
Definitely. That's what I was thinking too. I, went ahead and was looking at all these different like strategies for people who gotten through it. But every time I took all like the practice tests, I noticed that the question types that I struggled the most on at solving at, a decent pace are identify the flaw and weakening the question or weakening the argument. Because I feel like for weakening ones, I get stuck between like 2 or 3, and I think, well, both of these could kind of, destroy the argument. But then it turns out it's the one I wasn't even thinking about. Or with like flaws, I guess I'm just not really understanding how they want me to identify the flaw that's used there. So those 2 question types, I feel like I really struggle on.
Yeah, that can be really tricky, especially for, let's say, flaw questions where they're using more abstract language.
Yeah,
it can be tough
easy,
to get.
Some are hard.
Does it come down to the abstract language in a lot of cases, or is it something else, do you think?
Yeah, sometimes it does come down to the language choices that they use. Some are easier than the others. Like some you can tell, well, causation doesn't just mean that both are related, right? Like there could be so many different factors involved in that. And so that one's easy for me to just select and move on. But then there's some where I just can't tell what the flaw is because they're not giving me like anything to work with, and it's just extremely vague. And
okay, yeah.
Their point, I guess.
Yeah, well, in those cases, yes, the abstract language can throw you off, but you also might not even know what you're looking for in the first place. Yeah. And so to me, that's regardless. That's aside from the answer choice language. That comes down to what's going on in the stimulus. I would never want you to look at an answer choice until you already have an idea of what the flaw in the stimulus was. Otherwise, you don't even know what you're looking for. So I'd focus on the stimulus, figure out, they've already told you it's flawed, so you know there's something wrong with it. The question is, what's wrong with it? Can you articulate that in your own words and identify it for yourself? You can then prephrase or make a prediction of what's going on, what LSAC is looking for, They're looking for one major problem with their argument. And then it comes down to looking at LSAC's descriptions of what you've predicted. And in many cases, knocking out what clearly doesn't fit, working by elimination. And then whatever's left, even if you don't fully understand the language, by elimination, that's got to be it.
Yeah, I found elimination helps me a lot. But then sometimes it'll screw me over when I think something is irrelevant, or I think like, oh, well, this seems way too vague to be the answer. And it turns out that was the answer. So now I've been more skeptical about what I'm eliminating and just making sure that it really does not fit into the question at all before moving on with it. But
Well,
I
we've
guess
just,
that's
we've,
something else I really need to know.
sorry, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say,
Gonna say, that
okay.
that's like, sorry, that's like something that I feel like I really will need to learn from you in these classes, is the best strategies for attacking logical reasoning and how to find the answer to these, like how to properly prephase all the answers.
Yeah, well, you can't properly prephase everything. For flaw questions, ideally, you can prephrase in that question type. It comes down to making sure you really have a solid handle on exactly what the problem with the argument was. In some cases, tougher logical reasoning flaw questions, you may not know exactly what's wrong with it. In some cases, people will tell me like, hey, the argument looks fine. And I get that just because you haven't looked deep enough at exactly what their claims are based on their evidence. There's going to be some problem. In some cases, it's a classic logical fallacy like correlation causation. But in other cases, it may be something weird going on with numbers and percentages. That's hard to get a handle on, but you got to look at exactly what it is that they're saying. And you can't move on to the choices till you understand the stimulus. The choices only make sense in the context of the stimulus.
Right. Definitely. So I feel like that's one thing I will have to work on. And I am planning on attending like the classes that are held every day, because I feel like they will be very helpful for me. And then, the last thing obviously is reading comprehension. I feel like you get this all the time, is the timing, 35 minutes, 27 questions. You're reading these long passages, and some of the questions are so specific. It's like, I can't just, skim it and then move on, because then I feel like I'm wasting more time by finding that place and reading into it. So, how do you handle that? How do you handle getting to all those questions?
Yeah, sure. Well, part of it is being strategic in what you read for on your first read. We can help you speed up on reading comprehension by helping you pinpoint specific areas to slow down on, and the rest you can simply speed up on it. So I want you to focus on reading for the author's opinion and the main point, which largely overlap. You're looking for what is their central claim in that passage, focusing on finding where they best articulate it. Focus there, maybe make a brief note of it, either mentally or just a few words on your scratch paper. That's it. The details, you can note where they are to go back and find them when you need them, but you don't need to thoroughly digest them all in the moment. And this helps you save time so that later, when there are detail-oriented questions, you can just go back to those specific sections of the passage and then go deeper on what exactly they were talking about there. But it's hard to absorb 500 plus words or 450, 500 words in just a couple of minutes. But you can't take more than a couple of minutes because you need time to solve all the questions as well. And we're looking at about 7 questions per passage.
Definitely. Well, that's kind of the problem that I've been having, is that I'm reading it all very thoroughly and then moving on to the questions, because I think, well, then I won't have to, reread. I can just go through the questions and just know. But then that's not what's working out for me, because I'm spending way too much time on the reading part. And I'm assuming that is not what the test makers want us to do. They want us to be smart about how fast we're reading and know when to slow down, just like you said.
Exactly. This relates somewhat to the brute force we were talking about earlier in the logic games context, where as much as it would be ideal to do everything and be thorough in everything, this is a standardized test, and time constraint is actually unreasonable. They design it so that most people cannot finish in the time allotted. And that means you have to, quote unquote, be strategic. You have to cut corners, quote unquote. You have to be strategic in where you choose to allocate your time. And then when you need something, then you go back for it. But you can't look at everything on the first run through and understand it comprehensively. So I'd recommend focusing on the viewpoints, like I said, the author's opinion. The details, the evidence, you know where it is, but you don't need to go in depth understanding all of it, because again, most of the subject matter is going to be topics that you're not really that familiar with by design. They're choosing topics that most people don't have prior exposure to because they want to make it boring. They're choosing topics that are not that exciting. They want to make it boring. They want to make it unappealing, and they want to make it seem unrelatable. If you want a really tough passage, that's an example of this. Look at the riddled basins of attraction passage. I think it's in test 50. I would not have known anything about that prior, and I had to make up analogies for myself to get a handle on what they were doing, which is another tactic I recommend, where I'm actually going away from the detail they gave me and subbing in my own understanding as a layer on top to help me get through it. And then later, the specific examples they were talking about, I'll get into when I actually need to for one of those local oriented questions.
Right. That makes sense. And I'm sure like with time and, with the classes and everything, I will get a hang on that. I know we are out of time and you probably have other calls to get to as well. But I suppose like my last two questions were, do you or do people that work for you help with like law school applications? Like, do you guys help with reviewing like personal statements and essays and just being like, hey, well, maybe take this out or you can do better. Just help us put together that application.
Definitely, we do. We have a couple of consultants on the team. They're actually holding live sessions every Wednesday night inside the course. And so you can also email them at admissions@lsatunplugged.com, or you can just attend one of the Wednesday night sessions and you can submit your personal statement draft and any other drafts for review in a future workshop.
Okay, that's great. And they will help us kind of get that together and make sure that it's the best that it can be.
Exactly.
Okay, great. I definitely will need that. I had a few meetings with admissions directors at Yale and Harvard and Georgetown and was just talking to them about, what do they mainly look for in these personal statements? I will also obviously be adding a diversity statement. So it's more like, what are you guys looking for? What should I stay away from? What really captures your attention? Because I want them to know who I am and, why I would be a great addition to their school. So there's that. And then my last question is, I feel like I will need some one-on-one classes. I think the group classes will be really helpful, but just knowing me, the way that I kind of hang on to things as well, like in my mind, one-on-one classes will be really helpful for me. So how do I go about like scheduling that? Like, how does that work?
Oh, fantastic. Well, it strikes me that you're extremely diligent and dedicated to this process. Just from everything, the kinds of questions you've been asking me are definitely the higher level questions. And the fact that you're also looking into the admissions side of things as well already, you're meeting with people already, you're thinking about this already. I'm excited about the possibility of working with you. So yeah, so what I can do is I can send you an email after this call with more information about the one-on-one coaching. We can also have you fill out an application form. We'll book a separate call to discuss that specifically, and then we can take it from there.
Okay, yeah, that sounds really, really great. I think I will definitely need that. So from now on, I am planning to take the LSAT on August 17th. So I have until then to kind of, whip everything back into shape and just really start new strategies. Do you think that's enough time just compared to where I was doing the practice test and just knowing that my performance wasn't based on what I knew, but it was just more based on all of the external factors that went into it? And what do you think my steps should be now? Like, what do you think I should be attending all the classes every single day? What do you think I should do now?
The fact that you were already scoring high 160s, you said 172 a couple of times, right? So you were up there. That's just to me that you may not need tons of time, like the next roughly 6 weeks or so between now and August. That could be enough. So I would go forward with that in mind. And if you end up going for October instead, that's also okay. You can still apply very early in the cycle either way. But I'd aim for August. I'd say, yes, attend the classes, watch the course lesson videos. You don't need to attend every single class. There's too many for that. I don't want you to burn out. You don't need to watch every video. There's way too many for that. But you can pinpoint specific things. So if you're interested in logical reasoning flaw questions and we have a class on that, attend that one. Alternatively, you can watch the videos inside the course. We have several on flaw questions alone, full-length class recordings, at least six of them, I think. And you can also increase the playback speed if you want to get through more material and you can digest it during that time. So pick what works for you. There's a lot available, but don't feel like you have to do all of it. And then, of course, if we explore the one-on-one, that's also a way to do some more targeted, personalized support to help you maximize what you're doing for the next 6 weeks.
Okay. Yeah, that all sounds great. And the LSAT that is like now like starting again in August, isn't it graded the same way as the LSAT Flex? There's only 3 scored sections, and then one of them is like experimental. So when I'm taking like all these practice exams on like Khan Academy or Power Score or on like the LSAC Law Hub website, are they scoring all four of them? So do I only need to pay attention to how I'm scoring on three of the sections?
So you're right. There are only 3 scored sections on the 4-section LSAT. One of the sections is unscored and is the experimental section, but you're not going to know which one it is on test day. So you still have to give all 4 sections your full effort. It is not possible to tell during the exam. Don't even try. Just try on everything. Obviously, after the fact, if you got 2 of one type, like 2 logic game sections, you'll know one of them didn't count, but you won't know which one. So still give your full effort and take your practice tests with 4 sections, not 3. I'd also recommend specifically using LSAC's Law Hub website, not any of the others, because LSAC's Law Hub is the only one that is even permitted to look like the actual thing. It looks just like what you'll do on LSAT test day itself through ProctorU, but none of the other services can replicate the exact look and feel and the style.
Yeah, it seemed very, I guess I expected it to look a lot better than it did look. It looked very childish to me. So I was really thrown off by that, because I feel like the Khan Academy and all those other websites, it looks better. Like the test actually looks better. And this just kind of really threw me off. Like it looked so like 90s to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Microsoft designed it, so it's not up to modern standards in my view either. And one thing you should know is that sometimes the highlighting tool is a little bit glitchy. And so it's actually possible that other services have a better highlighter, but while a better highlighter would be nice to have, you need to know what you're actually going to be dealing with. So you can say, hey, do I even want to use this thing or not?
Right. So I actually, that is one thing I did not do that I wish I did, was look into practicing on Law Hub, because I only got the email about it, or actually looked at it, because for some reason a lot of it went into my spam folder the day before the LSAT. So I never even got to go on Law Hub and, really utilize the things on there besides like the writing service. That's all I was able to use. So I feel like if I had done that, that kind of would have prepared me at calming down a little bit on test day.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend doing everything you can to get used to exactly what you're going to be dealing with. So yeah, I'm glad you know about Law Hub now. You're prepared for what the 4-section format will be. So let's get to it. Take a practice test or 2 every single week, and we'll talk more about what you could be doing specifically. So I'm excited for you. I'm excited to have you in the course. I'm excited about the possibility of working with you one-on-one. So keep at it.
I will. Thank you so much. This was a really good conversation. I feel really, really confident working with LSAT Unplugged. I'm really excited about this, and I really do feel like I can just do super great just knowing all the classes and strategies that you guys have available to teach students.
Awesome. I'm excited to have you on board. We'll be in touch. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.